What is LNT? It is a set of 7 principles that provide an easily understood framework of minimum impact practices for anyone visiting the outdoors. It applies to every recreational activity, from remote wilderness areas to local parks. It's a focus on educating people instead of costly restoration programs or restrictions to help protect our lands. LNT is now a formal nonprofit organization based out of Boulder, Colorado.
Leave No Trace was originally started as a game with the Montana State Outfitters, where they had decided they were just doing too much damage in the wilderness. I mean, they were talking about taking 75 people on a trip and like 120 to 130 animals, and then staying in a meadow for a week at a time, and then moving on and maybe going, then the trip was over, they'd go back, they'd repack, and a week later they'd be back there with the same size group, but they wouldn't camp in the same spot because that was all degraded from the guys that were there before. Never mind that it was them. So by the end of the summer, the meadow, beautiful, pristine meadows that they were using would be trashed because everybody'd go in and use a different spot instead of using the same spot. So they all were talking about we need to lower our impact and try to make things look better and so forth and so on. And one of the ideas somebody came up with is, hey, why don't we try to find something that somebody leaves in a camp? And then when we have our annual convention in the winter, we'll tell them when we found it and who left it, and there was a big pot of money. And whoever had the least amount of junk found or whatever won the pot of money. And that's where they came up with this kind of Leave No Trace, and it may have morphed through several different names over time. But what they discovered was they were having so much interest in their program that they didn't have time to do it justice and run their businesses that they needed to do to make a living. And so they sold the Leave No Trace concept and principles to an organization that's now leavenotrace.org, based out of Boulder, Colorado.
Leave No Trace is a set of 7 principles. 1. Plan ahead and prepare. 2. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. 3. Dispose of waste properly. 4. Be considerate of others. 5. Respect wildlife. 6. Leave what you find. 7. Minimize campfire impacts. As taught by our LNT instructors, George Johnson, Jean Clancy, Lisa Rodriguez, and Betty Applebaker, these are principles, not rules, that each of us who enjoy the outdoors and wildlife have an inherent ethical responsibility to help keep nature and its resources healthy into perpetuity. Each of us may apply these principles in slightly different ways, as we all fall on a continuum between anthropocentric and ecocentric personal viewpoints. Despite these variations, we should each strive to become better in our practices each time we enjoy the outdoors. As you interact with others on the trail, keep an open mind, but also work to increase your own level of confidence with the LNT principles to be able to explain to others why and how to interact with nature. In the right situation, little suggestions here and there can have a bigger impact than we realize. Aldo Leopold stated, "Ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal." Plan ahead and prepare. This is arguably the most important principle. Are you and your equine going to be prepared for the trip? And you must prepare for the worst case scenarios. How long will you be gone? Where are you going? How many people in stock will you have? what time of year, what elevation. About every 3,000 foot gain is about 1 day of acclimation for your stock animals and yourself. What resources will there be? What regulations, maybe a heartbeat limit or permits that need to be acquired? Does your animal highline or hobble? Are you both in shape? Can you walk out if things happen? Are there health needs that your trail mates need to know about? Identify a human and equine go-to person in your group for emergency situations that may arise.
So, plan ahead, be prepared. What's the first thing you should do? First thing Dick's going to do is figure out how long he wants to be gone.
Where do you want to go?
There you go.
Yeah.
Where are you going? How many people? Is that what Kim said?
Yeah.
How many? Time of year?
How many stock?
Yeah.
How many people?
How many do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to do what you're doing. So for me, plan ahead, be prepared. It all starts at home. Preparing your animals. Are you going to take your animal into the backcountry? If you are, does your animal need to have shoes? Or are you one of the dark side people that ride mules and you don't have to shoe them? And then some of us have to shoe our mules because they're either older or bloodline is such that they don't have as hard a feet as some other mules. So there's like all these areas. There's the personal. Are you prepared? Is your animal prepared? And then what do you need to take with you? Where are you going to go? What time of year is it? What kind of conditions is there water? Is there grass? Is there all those things? Where's your resources? Who do you get a hold of? Where do you start? Are you going into a wilderness that has a heartbeat rule? Are you outside of a wilderness? Most of the wildernesses don't want more than 12 heartbeats. So that's all the information you need to start looking at. Where are you going? What are you doing? Plan ahead, be prepared. Does your animal highline? Does your animal hobble?
Is it in shape to go?
Is it in shape? Okay, then people, are you in shape? Are you mentally prepared for a wilderness? So that's, plan ahead, knowing that you're going somewhere where it's going to be tough.
Plan your ride, ride your plan. Tell others at home of your plan, and if it changes, be sure to let them know. Make pack lists and agenda for your group. Contact the Forest Service, BLM, or landowner prior for current conditions and advice. Know the county that you are in, for instance, the sheriff department's number and the closest veterinarian. Consider purchasing a compass and digital map or communication system. Weed-free hay is USDA advised to feed 3 days prior to your trip. Weed seeds can last up to 40 years.
Planning a trip. One of the things I teach hunter safety, and one of the things we always tell people is plan your hunt, hunt your plan. Does that make sense? And notify someone of your plan. So if you don't show up on Tuesday the 15th, when you said you were going to be home, somebody knows you're not on schedule, and somebody knows where you are. So if you're going to change your plan, you have to let somebody know. Mm-hmm. So then the next thing I say to the kids is, what is a GPS? Well, it's this electronic satellite device that tells you where you're at. What's it operate on? Batteries. It's a mechanical device that can and will fail. And inReach is the same thing. It's just a GPS with enhanced communication. If you use a GPS, the most important tool that you can have in your saddlebag with you is a compass and a map. If you're going to go on a trip, You should have a map of the area. But more so when you're in the backcountry, looking at your maps, knowing your routes. Is there a cutoff trail? Are we at the point of no return where going ahead is shorter than going back? Those are all things you need to consider.
That is the most important one for safety.
Safety.
If you make your plan, you look at all of the different things and options, and you take the things that you need to deal with situations and emergencies, and you've done your homework about where you're going and who you're talking to and what's the conditions and where's the snow, where's the feed, is the feed up yet, all those things. Then you don't have any big surprises that cause a wreck.
The second principle is travel and camp on durable surfaces. Stay on the trail. Some exceptions would be to camp and use the restroom 200 feet or more from water. Use pre-existing campsites when possible. When choosing a path, your first choice should be to travel on rocks and gravel. Second, ice or snow. Third choice should be vegetation. Avoid mud and cryptobiotic crust, which is super fragile.
So I'm going to talk about principle number 2, which is travel and camp on durable surfaces. There are trails, and the trails are to get us to a destination. So if there are trails, we should stay on the trails. Traveling on the trails limits the damage that is done if we disperse out through the land. We do have a little bit of off-trail travel when we're out in the woods sometimes, because we're going to search out a place to go potty. We're going to search out a place to have our camp. And so it's important when we are going off trail to know how to travel in that space. Surface durability on rocks and gravel is the best. The next hardest surface to damage anything in the terrain is ice and snow. You can travel across that ice or snow and it's not trampling the vegetation underneath. And the next would be vegetation. So vegetation in different areas is anywhere from super tough and you can trample it a lot and it's not going to cause lasting damage, to areas, the subalpine areas, alpine areas where the vegetation is very fragile. And if you need to travel across vegetation, if you have some place that has tufts of grass, those are usually pretty tough. You can walk on those, try to avoid the areas where you have just little areas of maybe wildflowers. I would say this area is kind of medium to me because the soil is very sandy. If we stayed here and we did what we are doing for a week, this would be trampled out. There's another thing in more deserty areas, and it's called living soil, and it's a cryptoorganism, cryptobiotic crust it's called. So it's actually a covering of organisms, and it rises off the surface just a little bit. It's black and porous looking, or dark charcoal gray and porous looking. That's extremely fragile. Its function is to hold the moisture into the earth. And when it gets disturbed, it really can't repair itself very easily. They say that in the desert, we shouldn't bother mud holes or water holes because the creatures that live there depend on them or they live in them. Let's talk about choosing a campsite. It's important that if the destination has designated campsites, that we use those. That way, we're disturbing less soil. Most of those campsites, if you've been anywhere that lots of people backpack and camp in, those sites are so degraded they're not going to come back anyway. So the Forest Service would prefer that we continue to use those sites. You should use the ones that are already there and not make new ones. Camping in undisturbed remote areas. So they talk about you can choose to go where people are not and where there are not developed campsites. And it's important to just take a little look around and see where you're going to impact that site the least, considering what type of vegetation, what type of ground. If you have a choice to put your campsite in the site where most people are going to congregate on a rocky surface, it's best to do that. Let's talk about how far away from the lake to camp.
When I started backpacking, the standard was camp 50 feet off water, so you don't impact the other users, mostly wildlife, correct? And then it went to 100, and then it went to 150. And the current standard they're going is 200 feet, at least the areas I'm familiar with. They would like you to be 200 feet off water where you can. Okay. So I'm going to challenge you guys. We got to find a spot here. I think we can walk out this way. I want each of you, without consulting anyone else, you stop at what you think is 200 feet. And then we'll find out if you really are at 200 feet.
This is the lake.
This is the lake, and you're headed out that way.
This is the lake.
You're the lake.
What's the button right there?
26 yards, Corinne.
78 feet.
Okay.
Kara.
Whoa, if she's 78, wait.
Stop, Kara. Stop.
You're about 42 yards.
126 feet. Betty, you're at 147. Dick, 156. 165, Ron. Joni, 180. Ed and Kim, 192.
Yeah.
What is your conclusion from what we just did?
That it's a lot farther than you think, and most people, if you go out riding and you ride around any lakes, you know that most of the camp spots are for backpackers are right on the lake. They really are. People don't really know, I guess, or pay attention. They just camp where everybody else has been camping.
It's your ethic. It's how you want to, how you want to leave something for somebody else who comes along behind you and may camp in the same spot. You don't want to come in on top of horse poop if you're a hiker.
So travel and camp on durable surfaces. Input from other people.
One of the most eye-opening things about where to camp was one experience I had it was the John Muir Wilderness, and we had set up tents, and it was a subalpine area or alpine, and there's just little tufts of grass, and it was just gravel basically, and we're like pretty flat, pretty bare. Let's set up here, and the ranger came by, and he said, you guys can't have your tents on these tufts of grasses. We have monitoring shown with photos going back to, 1940s, 1930s, with these individual tufts of grass that were here then. And I was like, whoa. Oh my gosh, okay, we got to rethink how we do this, But that was one of the most eye-opening things about, picking camp selection and being cognizant of where you are, Anywhere else, a tuft of grass is a tuft of grass, but those things matter to somebody, and depending on the ecosystem and the place you're in, they could be pretty important,
Good thing you didn't let your mules eat them off.
I know. Right, yeah.
Well, if something that's not posted, how would you even know?
The third principle is to dispose of waste properly. If you pack it in, pack it out, period. Your goal should be in a year's time to return and see no trace of your previous presence. Urine has an odor concern, and animals are attracted to the salt content, so it is best on bare ground or directly into bodies of water, but not on rocks. Poo should be dealt with in an 8-inch deep hole, 200 feet away from water. It will decompose, but the wipes will not. Bring a Ziploc bag to pack out wipes. Double duty is an option if you would like a purchased plant-based toilet with gel that is also decomposable.
I'm on for poop. You know, they didn't put me down as first or second principle, but it really is right up there with number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is
Good job, Ed.
is really important. And truly, you know, poop is one of the issues, horse poop at least, and our heavy use will get us excused from the wilderness. So pack it in and pack it out. You have a responsibility to clean up what you leave behind. Look around. Make it cleaner than it was when you arrived. If you're in a pristine spot, the goal for LNT, this is a motto you can hang your hat on, return a year later to that spot and you'll see no trace that you were ever there. And that includes with a pack string. So there are 3 basic ways that we make waste when we camp. And of course, one is human waste, and you can think of a different one. Garbage, litter, garbage. What'd you say?
Leftover food.
Leftover
which
food,
is
exactly.
garbage,
Exactly. And of course, there's animal waste we leave behind too. Let's look first at urine. And, you know, it's like, yeah, big deal. It is a big deal. In places that get used continually. This one has the grace of a little bucks, but when you're in the backcountry, of course, there's not. So it's not such a health concern as it is an odor. You, of course, urinate away from camp. That's understood. Sometimes into a stream or a lake or a river is a better choice than on dry land because it takes care of the odor, but it doesn't contaminate the water. It's best on bare ground. Some surprising facts. One is that animals smell the urine and the salts, and they will come in after we're gone and eat the plants that they find traces of urine on. So, and also not on rocks, because it takes, besides the odor just stays, it takes a long time for it to decompose and or to go away. So solid human waste. All of you have experienced backcountry bathrooms, I'm sure. Let me show you mine. Okay. This backcountry bathroom fits in this. And this is the all-essential trowel. What do I need this for? And how many inches deep? 8 inches deep. And it's best to do it not only away from, certainly, and how far from water? 200 feet, thank you. Sometimes if you look around, you can find a spot that's a little softer dirt. Surprisingly, it will decompose. If we're careful, get it down deep enough, and do not bury the toilet paper. There's always this, if you're going to use this, make sure it's biodegradable if you can find that. And then wipes, and these of course don't degrade. So these need to go into, which you also are carrying in your backcountry bathroom, about 5 or 6 of these, depending on how long you're going to be out, so that you can pack it out. All right, washing hands, Castile soap. If you just one person, as I was saying, there's this, right? And if you've got a big group, maybe a trench is a better idea. In that case, somebody needs to bring a small collapsible shovel. You have that?
I have one.
Okay.
I just picked one up.
Well, maybe it's a
yesterday.
good time to discuss how we're going to do this when we go in, but it's, of course, 200 feet from water, and it's also away from camp. And what we have done in past is dig a trench, like behind a log, and then leave the shovel by the log. And when you go and you do what you have to do, then you turn around and you cover it up with the soil. Again, it's not so damaging to the environment because it will, with the soil and all the microbes in the soil, it will decompose.
A cat hole does break down quicker.
Okay.
But doing the trench, when you have a large group, you only have one location instead of 100 cat holes.
You have to be really careful with your food scraps at all possible. Don't just brush off your table. Collect everything. Again, you have lots of bags, right? And another thing is when we do dishes, we have gray water, especially with a group this big. We're going to have pots with some gray water. I heard pork chops. I heard maybe stew. Maybe. So here's a bottle of such thing. It has coffee grounds. It has some noodles.
Hey, there's your coffee for in the morning, Jack.
Just run it through the filter, it'll be fine.
But this stuff, if thrown out, of course, is going to attract insects and animals. One of the things about food waste that's so injurious to animals is that it collects, they see people and they come like it's the gravy train, and they collect in unnatural and unhealthy numbers. So here we go. I need a couple volunteers.
What are you gonna do?
That you have to step forward and take. I will not ask you to drink it. Okay? I have my man here. There you go. And now would his lovely bride like to help out?
Sure.
You can bring a sieve, but that's weight, right?
Oh, okay.
But there's a secret.
Uh-oh.
There is a secret. And we're going to step away from this mess I've made. Some of us, septuagenarians or whatever we are, still have old nylons. So I cut off the panties part. And here it is, the leg of an old panty. So there you go.
Okay.
And I'm backing up.
Okay, so what are we supposed to do?
You don't have to do the whole thing, but whatever, go ahead.
Filter some
And
stuff
what's
out?
going to come out at the bottom? And where do you want that to be?
Probably want to dig a hole. Can I dig a hole and have the
Alright.
drips go somewhere?
Or zip off back and take a leaf. And then, there we go. We have no
This
water.
this is going to be flavored water, sort of. There's a hole right there, an animal.
Yeah, close enough.
Dump it on the squirrel's head.
Yeah, Abby's going to help.
Yeah.
Dessert.
It's pretty easy to tuck one of
She's
these.
pretty shy. Normally she sees somebody
Abby,
digging,
help us
she's
dig.
right
In
in
your
there.
bag.
Get him, Abby. Get it. Get him, Abby. Get him. Get him.
Get him.
Abby, dig.
Get him.
Get him.
Come on.
I think you're good. It's just
Get
the
it.
fluids, not the.
What is it? Get the mouse. Get the mouse. Get him.
Get him. Good girl. Good girl. Bring your dog for your cat hole.
Get him. Get the mouse.
Yes, he's
That's
on
an example of a cat hole. That's for sure.
He's not.
No, what I would
Sit.
suggest is that you hold the bag and he pour into it.
And he
So you
pours
can
into
make it as wide as it needs
That's
to be.
pretty wide. Oh, Do you want
Yes,
to do the whole
gotta
thing?
Yeah,
Or-
just
Go
let's do
ahead. Swiggle it all around.
It's starting to get a little ripe.
And we're supposed to eat dinner.
Oh, dear. Well, first off, you wouldn't be pouring from a mason jar. You'd be pouring
yeah.
from a pan.
I didn't get everything.
All right.
Sorry.
Now it's kind of heavy, right?
Yeah.
Ed, you're up. Let me have this. You take that.
Okay.
And go it out over there,
Way over there.
way over there.
That big rock over there by that tree with the trim limb.
And do what?
We'll tell
Hey,
you once
cowboy.
you get there. No.
Gonna swing it around.
Swing your lasso overhead.
Overhead or
No.
sidearm.
No, that's how you get.
Overhead.
No.
No, it's gonna splatter everywhere.
That's far enough. We can't see you. No. Stand still, Ed, and go like this.
You don't trust her, do you?
Overhead.
It'll leave. It won't get on you.
Spin dry.
Get your elbow up.
Whose car is that?
Hey, you're throwing a rope. Come on. Abby, what is he doing? Abby, come.
I think I can eat that. He said,
Yeah.
"Did you get that out of that hole?"
Yeah.
I found the mouse, Abby.
Abby, there's the mouse. Yeah, don't tell her that. She'll have it. Thank you. No kisses.
All right.
All right,
What you got?
just some
So what should we do with it?
Yeah, we always tell her,
remains.
give a kiss.
Put it in a Ziploc bag and take it home.
That's okay.
Put it in a Ziploc bag and pack it out.
One of those.
So here you go.
Here, want to rock? Get stick. No, not
You
the
might
mouse.
have another meal.
She's gonna bury it.
I'm gonna cut it open.
Now,
No, you're gonna make that shorter.
No, you just
now
tied
what
the
if,
knot.
what if you were doing like a week and you just tied a knot in it?
Yeah.
And then did it again and kept tying knots until you had a whole string of them in your
You'll tie
bag?
it down to where,
Yeah.
right down to where the
We've done that.
debris is.
Yeah.
You can burn it. You can burn it in the fire then.
I've never done it. Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Oh, that's right. We don't have fires.
One of these Ziplocs. Is that okay? Or?
I just keep do it.
Till you hit yourself with it.
Yeah.
Spinning.
Thank you guys for being good sports.
I definitely learned something. I've never done it that way.
Bring some
We're scared.
Bathing should not be done in bodies of water, but rather on durable surface by using a collapsible bucket, cup, Castile soap, and towel. Your horse's waste should be kicked to be dispersed and covered with pine needles if available in a part of the ecosystem.
We tend to want to take baths after 5 days out. So, but you don't go into the water to bathe. You have your collapsible bucket, which weighs next to nothing, and it goes in your saddlebag. And you can go down to the river or the lake and dip it. And you come back up onto your durable landing spot. You're not going to do this in the soil and the mud. You're going to do this on hopefully a rocky outcropping. You could put it's Castile soap, not regular shampoo, Castile soap, in your hair and have your riding buddy. It's very useful to take one of those along. And wash it off. Wash your hair, wash your body in your bathing suit. I don't like cold water. So I heat a coffee pot of water. Or a pan. It doesn't take, a quart. I can take a bath and wash my hair in a quart of water. But I shampoo my hair and I rinse it. But I soak my body and just rinse off with that. With a cup. Water. I put a cup in the warm water and just pour it over. And I don't know that you're going to be able to take your bucket 200 feet away from the lake. That would be the best. But your method, you're already camped 200 feet away from the lake. What about animal waste? You got to go take responsibility once again. Go out into the meadow. Maybe a couple people just sort of side by side walk through and just kick it. And why would we do that?
Because it's faster.
That's spread out. Of course, and where they're highlined at night, you have to be able to clean up your highline site.
The fourth principle is to be considerate of others. Remember, we are all on a continuum. Increasing your own level of confidence to be able to explain these principles to others and pass on more information by example, with little suggestions here and there, will go a long ways.
All right. So be considerate of others. Betty said it so well the other night. She said that there's a spectrum of use of the backcountry, especially wilderness. And it goes from the purists to the people who would think that human beings don't even belong there. We should not enter this realm. And then on the other hand, we have people who would like to have everything, like bicycles and whatnot. But that's what did you call it? Anthrocentric
Anthropocentric.
Centered view. And somewhere in the middle, there's a compromise. One of the things is in getting along together out here with conflicting use and conflicting expectations. I would say anyone here who's spent any time in the wilderness has had an experience with inconsiderate use that you've come across, inconsiderate behavior possibly, or possibly have found yourself in the situation of being accused of being inconsiderate to others. I mean, why is being courteous so an essential thing, and why does L&T stress that?
I mean, it's part of the experience of being in the wilderness, right? I mean, I've seen, you could rattle off stories of people standing there shooting each other, going to blows. It's like, that's not what we come out here for, right? It's not the experience that you want to, you know, why even go out there if you're going to be having these encounters? So, I don't know, I feel like there's an element of that.
Well, we always have a better time when we go out and we meet friendly people and we're friendly to them, and we let the kids pet the horses, and, you know, everybody comes out ahead.
Through hiker come through when we were at the Chinese Wall, and he was from France. You know, I mean, so he's hiking and we're riding, and he's got to pull off the trail and use the trail too. You know, and if we leave a mess, he goes back to France and talks about it.
Right, exactly. So you've said twice now, mostly it has to do with our mess or our what we leave behind. Mm-hmm. So that's being plainly being courteous.
Yep.
Right.
I think everybody is equal. I mean, we need to see everybody, the other users, as equal, and not think that our use is, you know, better than their use or da-da. And so we have to be congenial and treat everybody with respect. We're sharing. And so the way you do that is to be polite and friendly. And give them way if you can, like when we meet people on the trail, for example, you know, we have the right of way, but if you have a good place that you can get off, it does a lot for how they see us if we say, here, I've got a good place to get off, so you can go on by.
Instead of them stepping out into Poison Oak.
Yeah.
Exactly. And say as much. Say, here, I'll get off so you don't have to get into the Poison Oak. Or, you know, engage people. Remind me, what are we doing this essentially for? What's the result that we want as backcountry horsemen from being courteous?
Positive view of horse people so that they will share it.
And what's the result of a positive view of horse people?
So we'll continue to have a place
That we continue to be out there, that the public will be accepting of us.
The fifth principle is to respect wildlife. That means give them space. We are just visitors in their home. Use bear-proof boxes for food and horse grain.
Respecting wildlife to me is the big thing. It's this is their space. We're only the visitor. They live here. And we need to figure out how to coexist as best we can and not impede their life. And somebody say, well, you guys are close to water. So why did we pick this spot? Even though we're closer to water than we're supposed to be. What was the second principle?
Well, this is a known campsite.
Yeah.
Travel and camp on durable surfaces. This has been used. So we're balancing the equation. It's like we've said all along. These are guidelines. These are areas where you determine what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Um, in this situation, this is a long established campsite, and we're impacting, I don't know, what would you say, Dick? 250 feet of waterway?
Yeah, probably. It's that.
If you look where our horses and mules have crossed down there, and up here where Eddie's been trying to catch fish or something, I don't know. I'd say 250 or 300 feet. We've impacted the waterway. But the water goes half a mile, 3/4 of a mile up the stream. It goes forever that way. Are we keeping any animals off water? You know, after you think about where you're camping and how you're impacting them by your camping, it's wildlife viewing and how close you get to them. Be aware of the fact that we have wolves, moose, elk, bears, grizzly bears, and the protocol for grizzly bears totally different than what we're doing here. The food is all put up in boxes. One of the things that I remember reading about in grizzly bear country, especially, how many of you brushed your teeth and right in front of your tent and spit out on the ground? Raise your hand.
Not grizzly bear.
Not in grizzly bear country, but the truth of the matter is, which bear kills the most humans in the United States every year and eats them?
Black bear.
Black bear. Grizzlies kill because you surprise them or you get close to their cub. Polar bears hunt people. Black bears will hunt and kill people. Black bears are totally opportunistic. If they happen to run into somebody in the wrong place, they'll kill them and eat them. And, you know, we play light with that. What other kind of things can you think about with wildlife?
Calving season.
Calving season. May, most of the time, they're dropping calves, they're dropping fawns. Bear cubs are born in the winter. Wolves are springtime. They whelp in the spring. And I think cougars pretty much drop kittens in the springtime.
Yeah, they're pretty much year round. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that, related to food, but horse grain, that's also a bear attraction.
Sure, it's sweet grain.
They love that stuff.
And deer.
They used to come to the pack station and clean the troughs.
Oh, really?
I've gone back to, grab something off my saddle to find, left my lunch on my saddle. My saddle was 50 yards off the rack somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, like for grain, I think also using bear boxes, like a kitchen box type setup is a smart thing.
Well, the other thing that bringing deer or elk around is that the predators follow them. So, there's a lot to think about. There's some discussion about the wild horses. If you're a horse person, we call them wild horses. If you're the fish and wildlife, you call them feral horses. Regardless of the situation, they can come into camp, and you got a rank stud, it can cause some real serious issues. And I think the big thing is just the respect is give them their space. And if you want to take pictures, use your telephoto. Even these smartphones, their telephoto, you can zoom in on one from quite a distance away. So any kind of wild animal, just give them their space. If you're in an area where water is scarce, maybe 200 feet isn't even enough to be away from the water. I think it's all a matter of deciding what you're comfortable with, and whether or not the animals are comfortable. A quarter of a mile might be realistic. To me, if you're going to bring a dog into the backcountry, it needs to be a very well trained animal that's under control. If you get really technical and you read the rules about dogs, and it says under control, it doesn't say under leash, it says under control. Personal opinion at this point, I'm not a big fan of dogs and horses unless they're true working dogs that understand. We had several bad wrecks in the East Cascade chapter with people that wanted to bring their dogs out on a ride, and their dogs were just nuts.
The sixth principle is leave what you find. This includes arrowheads, dinosaur bones, wildflowers, etc. Permits are sometimes available for these items, such as mushroom picking, pine cones, trees, etc. What should you do if you find an arrowhead? Take a picture of it. Note its location, the date you found it, and any other details. Gently cover with surrounding soil and report to an agency or landowner for proper documentation and retrieval.
Leave what you find. So this, I think, is one of the better examples of there's a whole range of behaviors that you can choose with this. So I think of leave what you find as not bringing home rocks anymore. I don't bring home rocks. I used to be a real big rock bringer homer when I was a little kid. And I always had rocks in my pocket and rocks in my coats and things. But in the wilderness, I don't do that. A lot of places you cannot, and it's illegal to take things in certain places and bring them home. But I guess there's some things that you can get permits for and take home. You can go mushroom hunting. You can get a permit, and you can do cone collecting. I know that I, for one, like going to look for deer sheds. Most of us probably do. There's some purists that believe that we shouldn't pick them up, take them, because they're meant to be a source of calcium for the little squirrels and whatnot. But again, this is one of those things that we have to decide for ourselves what we pick up and take home and what we don't.
Don't
You guys
pick
have
the
other
wildflowers.
examples? Wildflowers,
That's
yeah.
very tempting, especially if you're with children and you see real pretty wildflowers. They want to go pick them off. It's like, no, leave them there for others to enjoy.
Well, what are you supposed to do if you find arrowheads or native artifacts? What are you
You're
supposed
not
to
supposed
do?
to pick them up.
Supposed
You're not supposed to pick them
What are you
up.
supposed to do, Joni?
You leave them there.
And the next person comes along. And is there an action to take once you?
Cover them up so they can't be seen.
That works.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm guessing.
Is there an agency you're supposed to report that to?
Archaeological people
Yeah.
Okay.
within the agencies.
That part I didn't know. So
Yeah, you're supposed to maybe take a picture of GPS.
Yeah, GPS location.
But you need to maybe cover them too so somebody else don't see them and take them.
That's a thought.
They're uncovering some more dinosaur bones out near Fossil. They just found a vertebrae of a big one, a big plant eater, but out there. And so there can be random dinosaur fossils out and about certain places too that we would need to report. I think it's Oregon State that's digging out there now, that place.
You can't even pick up a Prince Albert can out there because they haven't been made for over 50 years.
You come across an old garbage dump.
Right.
Old automobile parts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Historic debris is the politically
Yeah, what it is.
term. Historic.
It's what? It's called what?
Historic debris.
Instead of old garbage.
that
Yeah,
tin
like
can we seen on the
in the
trail.
60s when everybody went and found glass bottles. That was a huge thing back then.
The seventh principle is minimize campfire impacts. Overall, it's just better not to have campfires. If you do have a fire, use an established fire pit. Build a fire in the winter months, or only in emergency situations. You can use a fire pan to avoid catching the roots on fire. After you are done, make sure the fire is completely doused and bury remains in mineral soil.
I didn't bring my notes, and I have this whole little shtick about campfires. But more and more and more and more, we shouldn't be doing it. We just shouldn't be building campfires. That was what kids did, to roast marshmallows. It's okay in an established campsite in a park. It's just not okay out here. You can see why. So there's some things you can. What if you're out overnight and you're not prepared? I mean, you got lost, you got sidetracked, and would that be a legitimate reason? If you don't have sleeping bags and tents and you're going to spend the night out. So again, it's like all these others. It's like personal responsibility, but it's also your own discretion a lot of times. This is a decommissioned. What do they call them?
Fire
Shake and
shoulder.
bake.
Fire.
Shake and bake.
A decommissioned
Fire shoulder.
fire blanket that that the firefighters carry, and then if they're going to be overcome by fire, they'll pull these things up over themselves and shake and bake and hopefully live. So these things are incredible because just what happened to you, Lisa, would not happen with this.
Yeah.
This keeps that heat above ground, and when you pick it up, all these little critters and all this little grass and stuff is still gonna be okay. So if you're going to have a fire, and they require it if you're going to go on a river, like the John Day, you have to have a fire pan now, and it has to be like this far up off the ground. And you all know there are no fires in the wilderness either, above 5,700 feet, period. So you make a fire mound out of organic organic soil, your fire is going to, or your mound is going to catch fire. We're talking about making a mound.
A mound from like dirt.
You're going to go with your bucket and your trowel, which is from your backcountry bathroom, and go and fill your bucket with mineral soil. Soil that doesn't have any pine needles or any duff or anything in it. Well, what around here? I mean, what do you see? What's right over there? Do you see?
Well, a mound, gopher mound.
Yeah, gopher mounds. Those little guys are busy bringing that stuff up. So you might, and there's some over there right behind you, Joni. It's sandy. It's mineral soil is sometimes reddish, but you can see it's like disintegrated rock and sand. So you can go and get your bucket, fill it with that, and you're going to have a mound about this big around and about that high, 6 to 8 inches high. And then your fire doesn't go over the sides of that. Your fire stays right in that mound, right? And there's another thing to know too. You don't put a honking big log on it. Why would you just put, the rule of thumb is no stick larger than your wrist. Why would that be?
Those big logs burn forever.
Logs burn forever. So where are you going to get your little sticks?
Dead and down.
Dead stuff on the ground.
Plenty of it.
Dead stuff on the ground, yay. Are you going to break twigs off of trees?
No.
This is leave no trace, remember.
Dead and down.
So find stuff that's around. Do not break branches. Do not saw into something. You're trying to make it so the next people that come through will see it in its as natural state as possible. What are you going to do with the ashes and the fire, the mound? Remember, we're trying to leave no trace. We're trying to, like scorched rocks. If you build a fire with the fire ring and all those rocks are black, that's a sure sign.
Yeah.
So what can you do to get rid of ashes if there's no sign?
Bury them?
Yes. And where might you bury them?
It's a mineral soil.
Oh, yeah, I got
Mineral
you.
soil. You don't want to bury it in a little Duffy thing, do you?
No.
Well, ideally, you'd find a root wad for this mineral soil, and then you could go back to it and put, and it's just this whole thing is full of rocks that the trees turned up and sandy soil, and you can just go and bury it in that. So that's mainly it for campfire. Number one, don't do one. And if you must, be super careful. And if you don't have one of these, you can make a mound fire without one, but you would do it on a surface that's bare of any vegetation. This is another principle that people struggle with, I think, or a lot of people do, because a lot of people see a fire as a comforting cultural thing. Right. And so here again is your spectrum. You know, if you're in a place where there's not much down, you know, better not to have one at all, like she's saying. You know, but if you're in a place where there is stuff, or depending on your conditions or whatever it is, you know, it's where your comfort level is on the spectrum, and you try to improve your leave no trace ethic as you go, you know. So they're not saying don't do it. They're saying use your head,
Be
you know.
Be responsible.
Be responsible.
Yeah.
Try to do the right thing. Do the best that you can do.
It helps to have some strategies.
And knowing what you know, and so what this class does is it shows you what an ethic is, and it shows you some of the higher end skills. They're not saying you've got to do it. Leave no trace doesn't say that. But it shows you the higher end, and you may be down here and you'll say, oh, well, gosh, maybe I need to think about that a little bit more, and the next time you go, you know, you're here. You know, you may never reach here, but you're trying to maybe move along and think about things, you know, with your ethic. And always keep in mind that we're trying to leave no trace. And when the problem comes up, how are you best going to manage it?
Leave no trace is a set of 7 principles. 1. Plan ahead and prepare. 2. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. 3. Dispose of waste properly. 4. Be considerate of others. 5. Respect wildlife. 6. Leave what you find. 7. Minimize campfire impacts.